All right, y'all, here we go. This is the last part of chapter 5, so part 4 of the chapter on infancy from the book Language Development from Theory to Practice, Khara Turnbull and Laura Justice, third edition. So this is 147 to 157, and really we're going to talk a lot about measuring language development and research. So here we go. So there are lots of different ways that researchers have figured out what infants know at certain points in development. One of the tasks that they use is called a habituation-dishabituation task. So what it does is that in a habituation task is that the researcher will show the same stimuli over and over until the infant's attention starts to wander. And then the dishabituation is that then they will introduce something new, and as soon as if the new stimulus recaptures the infant's attention, then they know that the infant has discriminated the difference between the new thing and the prior thing. So that's one of the ways that we know that infants can detect differences between sounds and objects. So back in the first video, when we talked about milestones, or when I talked about milestones, sorry, all I can hear are dogs snoring right now. Obviously, my attention is being disengaged by novel stimuli. Anyway, so when I was talking to you about categorization and how we know that infants can tell the difference between an animal and furniture, this is one of the ways that you can figure that out, is that you're showing the picture of, or perhaps the infant is seeing a picture of an animal like a dog, and so dog, 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 and then a table, and the infant's attention is recaptured, and that's how we know that they discriminated the difference between the dog and the table. Same thing with the dog and cat example. So another way of doing this is what's called a switch task. So this is an example of Stroop task that is also a switch task. So a lot of times it'll be used in conjunction with a habituation task. So going back to the previous slide, see where all the faces are face up, and then the faces are all upside down. So the switch task may be like, see, you can see here that in the habituation phase, they just see this one over and over and over again. And then maybe then they're shown this one. And then if they detect that these are different faces, then you can make some assumptions about what they understand, and about how subtly they can tell the difference. All right, versus a switch task would be from going from all the faces are right side up to all the faces are upside down. All right. The idea is that the infant should look longer at the switch trial, or if it's a completely different stimulus, whatever. And that indicates that they could tell the difference between them. Again, perceptually, they got that something new took place. Another way to do it, so clearly this cat is not engaged in a split screen paradigm, but I felt like as an academic, I needed to have a cat in my PowerPoint or somewhere in a recording, so here it is. So the idea is that they watch a split screen and the audio information matches information on one side of the screen. So let's say that there is a picture of a cat on this side of the screen, and they're hearing meowing, or the word cat, one way or the other. The idea is, and then over here, there's a picture of a dog. The idea is that the infant should watch the side with the cat in the meow longer because it is congruent with what they expect. So there you go. There are lots of variations on this particular paradigm that are pretty interesting, and feel free to put it into YouTube and see all of the different cool things that researchers do to with these kinds of studies. It really is pretty cool. All right. One of the other ways that we figure out what language milestones are and what typically happens over the course of development is by doing naturalistic observation. And actually, Brown's stages came from naturalistic observation of Brown's children. So there you go. So you have to be very systematic about it, though, because you can't just pick any one thing at one time and think that you know something about the course of development. So it is very systematic. Children are observed in several different environments. So maybe a baby is observed during a feeding routine, and then during play, and then maybe during some other kind of part of their day. Sometimes we will actually bring small people into the lab where we have more control over the stimulus material, so we can have several different children of the same age, but they're all playing with the same thing and being engaged with the investigator in the same way, and then that gives us a more controlled idea of what it is that kids typically do in that situation given the same parameters. So there's actually this awesome database called Childs, where that has literally hundreds, if not thousands, of different samples collected by researchers, I believe all over the world, that look at language development or different aspects of language production across all kinds of different contexts. One of the great things about that is when we end up with these big data sets, it gives us an opportunity to really look across context and get a really great idea of what children are producing across time and across different ages. All right. So the next thing is there are some really awesome neuroimaging studies that really have looked more at perception of phonemes and babies' abilities to perceive differences in phonemes. And one of the ways or typically the imaging studies will work is that maybe by using functional MRI, where you can actually, so this word hemodynamic, it means that they can measure where blood flow, changes in blood flow from one area of the brain to another. So hemodynamic generally means blood, think like hemoglobin. Um, and dynamic means movement. So you're looking at blood flow to various parts of the brain. And what researchers have found is that this same idea as habituation dishabituation tasks, that when infants perceive something new, the blood flow actually changes. So it's really pretty cool. So one of the things that, again, an oddball paradigm is similar in ways to the habituation dishabituation tasks. And so what happens, and this is just probably not an example necessarily you would use with an infant, but maybe where you have a particular sound being played, and then there's a blank screen, and then picture with sound, blank screen, picture with sound, with a different sound. And so that should catch their attention, right? Because now you're looking at a different face. Actually, it's just different hair. No, it's a completely different face. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the distractor picture is something like a dog. And that's where the standard stimulus is 80% of the time, and then 20% of the time they will get this odd thing. And that tells you whether they, again, are attending to the new thing, which means that they have perceived a difference between what they were hearing before and what they are hearing now. All right, so one of the reasons why all of this is relevant, in that you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to stick a kid in an fMRI and see where the blood flow is going. And you're right, generally speaking, you can't as a clinician. You're not going to have that kind of data, but we use this kind of data to know what is happening so that we as clinicians can identify when it is happening differently and whether intervention is warranted. So one of the ways that we measure language in infancy in order to, for diagnostic purposes or for developmental purposes, is that we uh, ask parents what's going on. And one of the things about it is that there have been lots and lots of naysayers over the many years of research talking about, oh, well, parents, what do parents know? They're not specialists, blah, blah, blah. They don't really know what they're looking at. But what we actually have found is that if you do a parent report, so if you ask them the questions and they tell you, yes, my child can do this, no, my child can't do that, and then you bring the same child into, let's say, a lab, or you send a speech language pathologist in to do a more direct assessment where the clinician is actually manipulating the environment, et cetera, to get the child to do stuff. They will find that the parents actually are right, that the things the parents said that the child could do, they can, and the things that the parents said the child couldn't do, they can't. So the parent report is actually a very accurate way to gather information on language development during infancy. And most of the time, it is, or one of the other reasons why it's potentially a lot more accurate is that when you come in as a completely unfamiliar adult to interact with an infant, you don't have the rapport to really get them to exhibit their very best skills. All right. I picked the helicopter parent quiz thing because I thought it was funny. And it's a parent reporting on their own parenting. So, whatever. I also thought it was ironic. So, that is it for content in chapter 5. Woohoo! So, we'll move on into chapter 6, which is toddlerhood. And I hope that all is well in your worlds. See ya. Well, I won't see ya because it's a video and you're not here. This is a bummer. Bye.